So I first went to China in the early 1980s, shortly after the Cultural Revolution had ended. And the Cultural Revolution was stopped higher education and turned all of education upside down. I think the motive of the communist leaders who started the Cultural Revolution was they'd won a war, but they realized the same people and their offspring had a lot of power. So it was trying to, in a brutal way, to level society. And among the things they did was stop higher education. And I think they also stopped high school and middle school education, though I'm not sure about that. So when I arrived to China in the early 1980s, it was an extraordinary impression for a kid who'd grown up in the Midwest of the United States. I couldn't believe how different things were. At that time, China was quite poor. They'd had a turbulent 150 years, but it had been really tough since the 1930s when they had a civil war, followed by the communist takeover, followed by some brutal social engineering that had left them short of food and not very rich in any way, except the dedicated communists might say spiritually. So everyone looked the same then, men and women, all dressed in Mao uniforms. There was one variation. They were either khaki or blue. Women wore no makeup. They wore straight, rather short hair. Elementary school was still going on, and I had a wonderful time visiting elementary schools throughout China. Well, since that period with the revolution, the second or third revolution in China, the Deng Xiaoping revolution, where they abandoned really a state-managed economy and introduced capitalism. There's been an amazing 35-year change since I've gone to China. So when I took a train trip from Beijing out into Mongolia to the city of Huhat, and it was a coal-burning steam engine with with windows that you put up and down to try to regulate the temperature. Now China has the most modern rail system in the world, and passenger trains are scheduled at over 200 miles an hour. When I went into cities like Shanghai and Beijing in the early 1980s, low buildings, I'd get up and jog early in the morning, and there was, as I jogged through the almost dark streets, there was a rustling of thousands or tens of thousands of people coming into the city, farmers hauling melons or cabbages in on bicycle carts into the city, some donkey carts, very few cars. The only cars were limousines in which government officials were chauffeured around the cities. Now, Beijing and Shanghai have the worst traffic in the world. You can't move really during rush hours. So I imagine education has changed over these years too, though I find the changes in education harder to see. Partly because structurally they're about the same. In particular, the participant structure of lessons is about the same as when I first went to China, with the teacher standing in front of the room. In most classes, the children arranged in long rows. There are fixed lessons in Chinese elementary schools. It's a departmentalized elementary school. The structure that we have here in the high school and middle school. The classes can be quite large, as I will show you later. So partly because of a strong sense the curriculum ought to be followed, that's what the teachers and the child's job is, to follow the curriculum. The head teachers of the different subjects like Chinese and math visit classes, and in a strict school they make sure every teacher is the same place in the textbook on a given day. So the pattern of interaction is led by the teacher in the front of the room, where the teacher taking approximately every other turn. Children stand to speak. They sit after they've answered the question and perhaps a follow-up. The teacher will say, "Sit down." So you stand to speak, say your piece, sit down. This cycle is repeated basically from first grade, as far as I can tell, into college. So a question that I've asked in recent years, my early years of research in China were about learning to read Chinese and comparative studies of learning to read Chinese and English. But we wondered what would happen if we broke up this pattern of teacher-directed lessons, put children in small, peer-managed groups. So the first question is, would they even be able to do it? And by a line of thinking prominent in this country, perhaps not. Starting with the famous Shirley Bryce Heath in her book, Ways with Words, written about the same time I first went to China. She said, children learn these patterns of discourse. They represent values, relationships with people, as well as ways of talking, all in a bundle that she called discourse. And she said the reason black children have trouble when they come to elementary school is they've learned a way of talking that is different from the ways expected by their middle-class teachers in school. So by this line of reasoning, if we put Chinese children in a small group and we ask them to discuss a question without the help of their teacher, they might be too shy to say anything. They might be awkward, hesitant. The discussion might die after a few minutes. So let's look at some Chinese classes and see if this is what happens. First, we're going to go to a small village in the township of Tongling. It's about 400 kilometers due west of Shanghai in Anhui province. There's a school here in the village, Longshan School, which serves, has one class at each grade level. In the fourth grade, the year we were there were 32 children enrolled. We divided them with the help of the teacher into matched groups. We didn't have the time to give a big battery of tests, as would be insisted upon by the Institute of Educational Sciences. So with the teacher's help, we divided them into two large groups, equal in academic attainment, balanced in terms of talkativeness and gender. And we gave two small groups of 8 children, 4 collaborative reasoning lessons. In a collaborative reasoning discussion, children read an interesting story and are asked a provocative question about the story, and then they discuss it with little or no help from the teacher. So the children had a 1-minute introduction to how this discussion was to go. And here's what we saw in the middle of these children's first discussion. Let's look at the story they were discussing. I'll let you read that for yourself. It's turned out to be a little easy for these children, but we were afraid of overshooting their reading level or their sophistication level.
Any guidance in turn taking? This remarkable.
They had a 1-minute introduction to how the rules for this. So I suppose you noticed they were able to handle turn taking.
Oh.
They had long, complicated ideas they expressed. They picked up on what the people before them had said. So it was a rather nice, mature discussion. And these are poor children from a village where families are not very well educated. We ran, in this early study, 6 discussion groups in various places in China and Korea. And we found this result in all 6 cases. It's not a very formal study, but do you need a lot of statistics?
It's a compelling demonstration.
Let's see. Well, now we'll look at another group of children. These are more privileged children. There are several towns named Suzhou in China. This is the one in Anhui province. It's about 600 kilometers northwest of Shanghai. And the children you're going to see, this is not their first experience with cooperative group work. These children have had 5 collaborative reasoning discussions like the one I showed you. And now we want to see whether they can use what they've learned in a new kind of cooperative activity. So we reshuffle the children. So what they're doing cannot be because they learned to work with certain other classmates. And we changed the task. This is they're going to solve a matchstick puzzle that looks like this. And there are 2 subparts. They want to move 2 matchsticks to create the largest number they can, and 2 matchsticks to make the smallest they can. This is a study done with Michelle Perry, Jingjing Sun, and Su-Rong Lin. And the point, we also had a control group. We got lots of statistics, but I'm not going to show you any of that. I want you to think about how the children are relating to one another, is the point of my showing it today. Now, the children had several other problems to solve and not much time. So it was vital they work well together. And just before the episode I'm going to show you, under the leadership of a small girl who you'll see in the back of the picture, named Hui Hui, they've divided into 2 subgroups. One subgroup, the children in the foreground, will work on the largest number problem, and the children in the 2 boys and Hui Hui in the background will work on the smallest number. So here we go. Well, we'll get older and more privileged. These are high school students from Hsinchu, Taiwan. And their parents typically are very well educated and have a science and technology job. But these children are going to speak in English. And they've not worked in groups and they don't have conversations with their friends in English. So let's see how it goes. Well, here's the discussion question. Jai Shen has a problem. What should she major in college? Notice we make the questions age appropriate. All right, well, here's the point of this set of informal studies and some more formal ones that I haven't described to you. Maybe we've exaggerated the emphasis of history and culture on young people. Maybe they're more adaptable than we give them credit for. So the words we used here, our social systems may be rigid, but children are flexible. If the system changes, the children can change too. Well, I'll run on now to show you some of my connections with China. Here I am at my 70th birthday party with a half dozen of my graduate students at that time. Every student I had at that particular point in history was Chinese, and they're helping me celebrate my birthday now. Becky Chen, these people have all done well. Becky Chen is an associate professor at the University of Toronto. Yin Li is an associate professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Li Jianguo is an associate professor at Texas A&M, and so on. And I still keep in touch with these people. Probably I'm in touch with them, most of them once a month at least. And I guess all but Li Jian are from mainland China. Well, I don't just go to schools and listen to children discuss stories. Sometimes I talk. Here I am outside of the lecture hall at National Taiwan Normal University in Taipei. And I think I'm actually giving the lecture here. A change of scenery. This is in Dujiangyan in Sichuan province. Dujiangyan is a place where there are famous irrigation works dating back a couple thousand years. A couple years after this picture was taken, an earthquake swept this region, and this school was damaged, though no one was injured. So what's happening here? These are 4-year-old children in a shared book reading lesson. It lasts over a week period, the way we've set it up in Chinese kindergartens. So these children are at the phase where they have drawn a picture that represents something about the story. Now, drawing is nice, but talking is even better. So the teacher is leading the children to explain what the significance of their pictures. And the children are already all dressed up in party dresses in honor of my visit. Isn't that sweet? The woman standing is interpreting what I've just said. This is a group of school teachers at a professional development meeting in Qingdao in Shandong province. And it's very, very hot. It's a seaside city, so I guess no air conditioning, but we needed it that day. Back in Taiwan, the blonde young woman on my right is my granddaughter, Eliza, and Xinmin, John, and Lucy, and we're hiking on Yangming Mountain overlooking Taipei City. And I was told 100 times, if I was told once, the views are great from the top of the mountain. Only the day we were there, there were low-hanging clouds, and we couldn't see 10 feet in front of us. And I feel that is my last slide. So let me hear your questions and comments. Yes, ma'am.
I teach in the Department of Linguistics, ESL specifically, so roughly 90% of my students are Chinese. And I struggled with them initially because I wasn't realizing what was happening in China. When I started out, I'd give them a group discussion question and just dead silence. Did you find that how you structured your questions or your instructions helped you facilitate a little better? I mean, that's improved my lessons for sure.
Right. We've worked on a period of years over on a frame that usually works. And if we start sticking close to our principles, then once we get people going, we can vary it. And we start with a controversial issue that the people want to discuss. And you saw that illustrated here with a age-appropriate questions for 10-year-olds. Should in an imaginary world where animals can talk, should a mouse dentist let in a dangerous fox into his office? With high school students, should you do what your parents want you to do and enter a profession that'll make you rich, or should you follow your own interests? So you can get over the hump where people want to communicate. And in a second language class in a foreign country, I don't know how all that's going to work. Myself, I don't have that experience. But in these settings back in China and Taiwan, this works fine.
It works quite well in my class now, but back 4 years ago, it was tough.
Great.
Encouraging to see that. So it seems that you're harkening back to Shirley Briggs Heath's hypothesis. Suggests, when I heard you talk about it, I thought you were endorsing it, but given the results you presented, it sounds like you're not. And I was just wondering if you wanted to reflect on your reaction to that and what you think, how you think your work contributes to how we understand the socialization of discourse.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I encapsulated my views on it already. I can acknowledge that there are quite a few reasons why this is not a perfect test of the discourse mismatch hypothesis with low-income minority children in the U.S. All these children think of themselves as being part of the majority. There might be some rural, urban difference in status in China, whereas minority children coming into a middle-class school may feel they're outsiders, they don't really belong there. Those kinds of issues are minimized, at least in the settings I've worked in China and Korea. But I do think if you can change the social system, you'll change the talk. Michelle.
Somewhat similar question. So in your talk, you demonstrated that children in China have the flexibility to engage in a different way of learning, assuming that they are right.
Assuming that's representative.
Right.
Or we didn't have little child actors.
No. It's just, you probably have also done studies to show that kind of collaborative discussion also leads to learning outcomes.
Yeah.
We have, in fact, the very studies I'm in that first study that involved, among others, the children from Longshan village. We had the children wrote an essay at the end, and the comparable controlled children wrote an essay. We scored these for quality of arguments in an essay on a completely different topic. And we got, as we do in this country, significant improvement in the argument structure in the essays.
So I guess my question is, and this is probably a question for this culture as well as the Chinese culture, is if the school system is set up not to facilitate that, then how do you, there's a mismatch of what you're trying to do with the kids and what the structure requires them to do or encourages them to do.
Right.
So how do you scale up what you're doing there?
Scaling up is a hard one because it requires a lot of decision makers to buy into an alternate point of view. And that's hard, especially hard for them to do when there's a high stakes test, multiple choice test that they're held responsible for.
Right.
And we do find that children who take a lot of time for collaborative group work perform as well or maybe better on a standardized multiple choice test. But that is not the perception of teachers, principals, policymakers, school boards. And it's hard to overturn that.
Okay. So I guess at first I was thinking this was an issue for the Chinese culture, perhaps.
The Chinese will probably be quicker to adapt. They have the same kinds of pressures to, in fact, if anything, they're have pressure squared compared to the U.S. And performance on a college entrance examination is life determining. So parents, teachers, the kids themselves are very concerned about getting absolutely the best score they can. However, the only moderately large-scale continuing adoption of collaborative reasoning in the world is in Beijing, China. Beijing is divided into districts. The Western District, which includes the famous universities. The collaborative reasoning is used in the upper elementary grades throughout schools in the district. It was introduced there by my academic granddaughter, Li Hong, who is an associate professor at Beijing Normal University, and several others of my students have gone over there to help get it started.
I think you commented on a little bit on how you made the groups, like if you had students grouped together, but I just wasn't sure if I caught. Did you group like students together, like?
No, they're heterogeneous groups, not homogeneous. We like the groups to be a cross-section of class in every way that counts. And the way we usually count is some measure or estimate of academic level, talkativeness, because discussions involve talk, gender, ethnicity, if it is an integrated class, and recently we've added to this list social status in the classroom social network. So we want a distribution of the social leaders and the peripheral children.
You don't see you don't find any evidence that poses barriers to equal contribution?
We make the group responsible for letting everyone have their say, and we find that when this is the norm that they're supposed to follow, the socially centered children make room for the shy children, invite them to speak, support them in speaking. In other settings, the socially centered children may ignore them and run roughshod over them, and they'll sit there like mice in the corner.